And so I'm honored to present Vice Admiral Lou Crenshaw, Navy, retired Navy Vice Admiral, with us today. And he is he founded a consulting company, Crenshaw Consulting Associates. He works with lots of people. He works with the veteran-owned small business operation in consulting. He has a record of 4 decades of proven executive success in a broad range of leadership positions in the public and private sectors. I'll read a little bit of his background for you. Lou was a principal in Grant Thornton from 2007 to 2013, where he was National Industry Partner in charge of the firm's aerospace and defense industry segment. Lou was also Defense and Intelligence Sector Lead in Grant Thornton's Global Public Sector. From 1974 to 2007, Lou was in the Navy, accumulating his career as the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Resources, Requirements, and Assessments, N8. He commanded an attack squadron, a carrier air wing, a carrier battle group, CCG-8, and the Naval Region Europe. Lou is a graduate of the Naval Academy and the U.S. Naval Test Pilot School and Certified Defense Financial Manager. Lou serves as the chair of our church's audit committee and is on the board for the Fund for Charitable Giving. So
I was going to mention that if you didn't.
The books. Yes. Chuck, thank you for being with us. Lou and his wife Marilyn here, and they've been members of NPC since 1997. So, Lou, take it over.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, it's always a great build-up, and I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you guys and talk to you a little bit about some leadership topics that are important to me. I usually bill myself as a twice failed retiree, failed in the Navy, failed at Grant Thornton, I got too old, so I had to have my own business. And the term Crenshaw Consulting Associates exaggerates the company it's associate to me. It's not that big, but I don't want it to get big either, so that's a good thing. So what we're going to do today, this is a presentation that's available on my website. I've modified it slightly for today. But there are several other leadership topics that are sitting on the website, and you can, I guess you can Google me if you want and find out what's on the website. It was originally intended for a senior executive military leadership course, but as I started putting it together and thinking about it, it turns out many of these principles are applicable not only in the military, but applicable in corporate life, and many of them are also applicable in our lives as Christians. And so I'd like for you to think about it that way as we sort of go through here. It'll be sort of fast because, I mean, I have a lot of slides. Theoretically, I have 3 minutes of slides to talk. I typically advise my clients not to use PowerPoint because usually we're meeting with somebody in the government and there's a tendency for people to want to read the PowerPoint slides to their client rather than listening to them. So I'll try not to read the slides because rule 1 is don't read the slides. I also tell people, and Fred and Roger can appreciate this, at least most people in the Pentagon, when you show a PowerPoint presentation, most of the senior people are checking your spelling and adding math and immediately, demonstrate their extreme prowess by saying, well, those numbers don't add up, and I'll do this rounding error or whatever. So hopefully there's no spelling errors out here. And I don't think I did any math, so I don't think I'll be in trouble there. But I'd just like for you to think about this in terms of your lives as Christians and where some of these principles apply. I call it a lifetime of lessons learned over Baghdad one night because I was very honored and privileged to command an attack squadron during the first Desert Storm. And in fact, I took over in August before Desert Storm as a commanding officer, where we were scheduled for a deployment in about a year. And the day after I took over was when Saddam invaded Kuwait, and within a week we got a message that said, be prepared to deploy on December 26th. So we had to really scramble to be ready to go, and because we had just given away all of our airplanes and all Squadron was about 360 enlisted guys and about 50 officers. Huge squadron because these are old airplanes, required a lot of maintenance. Just to give you an example, a F-18 squadron these days have the same number of airplanes. They have about 160 people in their squadron because they're just so much easier to maintain. There are a lot of pictures of A6s here. I was an A6 bombardier, and so out of reverence to the A6 community, I've put a whole bunch of interesting A6 pictures. At least I think they're interesting. Brings back the old memories for me. And so you'll see these. Now, you'll see a lot of stuff, a lot of dials and buttons. Remember, nowadays, jets don't have all this stuff. They just have touch screens, and it's rather interesting. But this was before GPS, where you actually had to find out where you were and keep up with where you were as opposed to GPS. And you actually had to find the target and put the bomb sight crosshairs on the target for the entire time you were maneuvering and everything, so the bombs would hit the target. This was before we had GPS-guided weapons as well. So we're just right at the leading edge of Tomahawks when we started doing Desert Storm. So that's what this is about. Let's see. From there, I just thought a couple of verses I think that were applicable as I was putting this together. One is Philippians 2, 3, and 4, and it talks about thinking about not doing things for yourself, but really putting your interest above everybody else's interest. And I think the mark of a great leader is someone who does that. And then there's another little credit down here that if you want to be great, then you have to be a servant. And you hear a lot of talk about servant leadership in some words of Harry Truman, which I think are really very, very applicable. And so you'll see that. So with that in mind, let's talk about how did Midshipman Lewis W. Crenshaw, Jr., 17-year-old knucklehead from Alabama, wind up in the United States Navy and eventually meeting the Queen. There she is. Hello. You remember on Master and Commander when Lucky Jack Aubrey is sitting at the table and Mr. Adams says, "Could we press you for an anecdote about having dinner with Lord Nelson?" You know, he says, "Aubrey, that's so." Well, my anecdote with the Queen, my discussion with the Queen was, "Oh, you're in the Navy." And then, "Yes, Your Majesty," and that was the extent of my discussion with the Queen. The lovely Mrs. Crenshaw, however, had a big discussion with her. Actually, you can see George Bush II right here. There's his nose. We were going through the sea line at Winfield House, a beautiful, the crown of the U.S. State Department Embassy residence. And look at this guy. No, this is not Brad Pitt. That's me on a submarine. At the ballast control panel as the chief of the watch.
Wow.
So, how did this happen? Well, it all comes down to choices, and all of us face choices all the time. I spoke at this class a few years ago where I talked about choices and ethical decision making and how we make it, and it all comes down to the choices that you make. Many of us would like just to be able to make those easy choices, left and right, good, bad. But unfortunately, particularly as leaders, we don't get that opportunity. Most of the questions that we have to decide are where there's no really good answer. Bill Lynn used to be the Deputy Secretary of Defense. He said, "I got a terrible job because everybody decides all the easy things before they get to me. And so I got all the things that nobody else can figure out what to do. And the Secretary sends me all the things he doesn't want to deal with. And so I get a double whammy from below and above." So all of the good things about being a leader are being choices. And one of the things that really impressed me, you guys remember when Earl was here, we talked about screw tape letters and C.S. Lewis. I mean, this little quote has always impressed me mightily about, it's not about the big choices that you make, but it's about the little choices that you make every day. And not that much longer before we joined the church, I had elicited Craig Barnes's help at preaching at the Naval Academy one Sunday, and this was his topic, which was really, I thought, very applicable to the midshipmen. So you never know about where you go, and once you start making choices, then you got to make sure that you're ready to make the right choices. And I think thinking about some of these leadership principles are what you want to do. So just a little bit about choices. All of us make choices, and this is the choice continuum between outcomes, good and bad, and quality of your decision, good and bad. So what happens when you have a good decision and it's a good quality and you get a good outcome? That's sweet, right? Everything's good. You thought about it, everything worked out bad. Sometimes, though, you make a bad decision and bad things happen. Well, you made that bed, so you might as well lie in it. Probably one of the more frustrating ones is when you make a good decision but you get a bad outcome. And that's going to happen. It's always going to happen, and you just have to be prepared to deal with it and understand that it's coming. Perhaps the most dangerous of all decisions and working for people is that one where you have a bad decision-making process, but it turns out okay. And we infer from that hey, that's great, so we'll repeat that again and again and again. And that's where you run into problems, is the bad quality of decision, but you get a great outcome anyway. So that's why you should constantly think about your decisions and revisit them and think about, let's think a little bit about what I decided and how it is this happened. Was it a result of a decision, or was I just really lucky? And of course, luck has its place in leadership. So, first night of Baghdad, first night of Iraq, my squadron had a target that was in Tikrit. We launched from the Red Sea and had a long, long way to go. Normally, A6s, when they delivered their weapons, would descend down to between 200 and 100 feet to drop their bombs. And we dropped a lot of bombs. We usually carried 20 to 24 bombs, 500 pounds apiece, and we dropped them down low because we got the best accuracy down there. Of course, that's where it's the most dangerous. That's where all of the anti-aircraft fire is, the missile fires. The ground is down there, which is usually has a PK of about 1.0 when you hit it when you're flying, which is not a good thing. But because we had to go to Tikrit from all the way over the Red Sea, it was an 8-hour mission, and we didn't have the gas to be able to go to the target and descend and drop our weapons and climb back up and get back. We already had to refuel twice from Air Force tankers as it was, so we stayed high. Boy, was that luck, because when we got to the target, and this is the picture, or the first picture was as we were flying by Baghdad that night, I was thinking, geez, am I glad I'm not going over there, because it was about 12 miles to our right, and I was thinking, that's not a good place to be over there, bullets coming up and everything. So we get to Tikrit. It was supposed to be an underground petroleum storage tank, storage facility. As it turns out, it was the bed-down area for the 24th Republican Guard Air Defense Brigade, which we knew nothing about. And when we got there, they just started shooting everything they had. Fortunately, we had to stay high, so we didn't really get down too deep into that. And then we come back, and everybody is hailing the VA-85 as being very smart, and a couple of other A6s were shot down from other squadrons because they were low. Well, and they said, Crenshaw, what a brilliant tactician. Well, thank you, Admiral. But as it turns out, we just didn't have the gas to go up, and we were just lucky. So that's one of those where we had probably not a good decision-making process, but we're very lucky. And after that, they in fact told everybody to stay above 15,000 feet. Don't go down low. It's not safe down there. So, it hurts when you do that. Don't do that. So, anyway, these are some lessons I learned. This is the old picture of the A6. This is what the pilot looked at when he was flying terrain avoidance. And this is 1960s technology, and you can just there's a valley here, and each one of these shades is a different range away from the airplane. So you can see he's turning right a little bit. Pretty soon he's going to have to turn left because there's a hill out in front. And the thing that I generated as the bombardier was this little square, which was called the steering symbol, and the pilot's job was to keep that little square right in the center of the screen. That's what they did while I sweated over there trying to figure out where we were. So let's talk about some of these lessons learned. First one is train as you fight. You should learn from every mission you go on, either routine or combat mission, or even those that you don't go on, that you intended on going on. There's always something to learn from that. Because people sometimes have a tendency to let up if they're on a practice mission or if they're on a simulator, and you don't have to worry about dying. If I run into the ground in the simulator, we just reset and keep flying. That's not so, on a live flight, it didn't work that way. And it builds up habit patterns. This is the way we carried our bombs. These are 500-pound bombs. There's 6 on each rack. We have 4 racks, and so carried 24 500-pound bombs. We're going to drop them low. These bombs here have these special fins that pop out like parachutes, because if you're low, flying like 500 knots, and you're 200 feet, and you release the weapons, guess what happens? They fly formation on you. So you don't want those bad boys blowing up, because they fly right with you. You know, an object in motion tends to stay in motion. So these parachute things pop out so that it falls back behind you and you don't blow yourself out of the sky.
That's a good idea.
We're always talking about this. Hope is not good strategy. And if you're in a position where you're relying on hope as a strategy, time to go back to your strategic planning process and figure out what you want to do. You need to identify weaknesses and fix them as part of your strategy when you're doing things. So, geez, I sure hope this turns out all right. You know, if I launched on a mission thinking, geez, I hope I come back, you know, I was always confident that I was going to come back, and hopefully would be surprised if I got shot down. It wasn't going to be something rather regular. And so you can see we're dropping some bombs here. These are free fall bombs, so there's I think I counted 24. So hard to believe that we carry that anymore. The new airplanes just carry 4 or 5 apiece, but since our aim wasn't very good, we had to carry 20. And there's a picture of those are 1,000-pound bombs. There are 3 1,000-pound bombs on each side of the airplane as it's taken off, weighing about 68,000 pounds is what we weighed when we took off. Plan, plan, plan. Always have a plan, and you can't over-plan a mission. Everything has to be done properly. You should leave nothing to chance. You should execute the mission that you plan. This is a lesson learned from many years of flying. Now it's interesting that Lou Crenshaw, squadron commanding officer, when the crews come to me and say, okay, Lou, or Skipper, we're getting ready to go fly, and we think there's about a 65% chance that we'll come back safely. So what do you think Skipper Crenshaw says? Yeah, I don't like those odds. Let's go back and do some more planning. Let's do some contingencies. Let's think about some other things that we might do. Maybe we need to have some more support aircraft. But I'm not going to take those odds. That's not good for me. I'm not sending you guys out for that. And eventually they come back and they say, oh, we think we've got a 99.9% chance that we'd probably execute this. And I said, that's good. Do it. Now here's the leadership lesson. Lou Crenshaw, Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Requirements, Resources, and Assessments. I had the checkbook. $130 billion. Everybody returned my phone calls immediately. And there wasn't one joke that wasn't hilarious. I told him, we have $130 billion on your checkbook. But that same Lou Crenshaw, when I asked an officer, what are the chances that the new littoral combat ship the Navy's buying is really going to cost $200 million? And he would say, the program officer would say, oh, maybe 10%. I go, well, that's good enough for me. And that's one of the reasons we find ourselves in the pickle we are with all these overpriced programs and everything, is leaders like me fail to apply the principles that we learned over and over again in our tactical lives. We fail to apply those principles when we get into Washington, D.C., because there's several reasons for that, not the least of which is, I mean, it's going to take 20 years to deliver that ship. I'm only going to be here for 3, so we'll let Chuck worry about it when he gets to be the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations. Which is another reason why I would always be extremely skeptical of any letters that you see signed by senior officers from years ago, because they're generally the ones that got us in a pickle we're in. So what do they know? You know, we need some new blood here, which is why I don't sign letters. Bad issue. So this is sitting on the catapult, getting ready to go. We're in tension, got steam everywhere. Now the newest catapults are electromagnetic of all things, no steam. This is an A6 getting ready to refuel from a Washington State KC-135 and a Prowler, the 4-seat version, affectionately known as a station wagon, waiting to go. They have 4 guys in that jet, but that was a jammer. So, interesting. At least in attack aviation, the only thing worse than being late is being early. Be on time. Now that's kind of hard to do sometimes in D.C. Because you either wind up getting there 30 minutes early for something, or you're an hour late because of the traffic. But in my business, you had to make sure you pretty much had everything planned out so you'd get there on time. Now, why do I say being early is worse than being late? Well, generally, you had this fairly sophisticated plan of airplanes sending in anti-radiation missiles ahead of you, fire suppression weapons coming in, so that the bad guy missiles and guns wouldn't be shooting at you as you enter their heart of their envelope. Well, that's okay if you're late, because they've already had all that stuff you know, death and destruction from above raining it out on top of them. Not so good if you're early because nothing's happened yet. So you're like a sitting duck out there. So don't be early. Don't do anything. Be late, but don't be late either. This is the standard that we use for Desert Storm. After traveling for several hours and 1,500 miles, we had to have bombs on target plus or minus 10 seconds was the standard. And that was using a wind-up clock. The only clock in the A6 was a wind-up 8-day clock that you wound up. And sometimes with discussions in the cockpit would not be, hey, are we getting ready to arm up the missiles and drop the bombs and everything? It was, are we coming up on 12 or 13? I can't really tell what that is, which was very important in approaches because airplanes approaching the deck every 60 seconds. And you mess it up by a minute, two jets arrive at the ramp at the same time. Very bad. But so that means you've got to constantly kind of just keep track of where you are and what you're doing. Just kind of, you got to know. We didn't have the luxury of GPS back then, so we just had to kind of keep track where we are. And if nothing else, looking at the stars, figuring out, are we really headed north? Because you got 3 or 4 different instruments in the cockpit that give you the direction you're traveling. Any one of which could be wrong. The only one that usually works is just the good old, what we call the wet compass, that just kind of stuck up in the front of just a regular old compass. And the wise guys would compare that to what all the sophisticated instrumentation was saying, just to make sure that we were going in the right direction. A favorite trick of flight instructors was when you weren't looking, they tweaked the direction, the electronic compass, so that you'd look back and go, oh, all right, and you'd go back, and then you'd realize 10 minutes later that, hey, we've been going north instead of south. Now you're lost. Not a good thing to be. So be exact. This is refueling from an A7. A7s were particularly challenging to refuel from because the fueling station was on the left wing, and when you were trying to get in and plug and direct your nose probe into that drogue, you were right there on his exhaust. It was blowing right on your right wing and your tail. So it was always, I flew with a guy that wasn't very tall, and in order to do that, you had to use a lot of rudder. And he usually was good for about 2 attempts, and then he got tired. His leg gave out on him. Probably didn't get gas that day. Very bad. So this is the inside of the cockpit getting ready to land up in Whidbey Island. See all the snow? Always have a backup plan. Always have a way of escaping. Always think about if something doesn't go right, what are you going to do? Because nothing ever goes according to plan. One of the good things about attack aviation was we were always accused by the fighter guys of doing too much planning. And of course in the Navy there's always a big rivalry between attack and fighter. Now, I don't know what they do because attack and fighter are together. Now all the squadrons are fighter attack squadrons together. But it used to be, the hallmark of an A6 mission was we'd have 3 or 4 different contingencies, we'd have all kinds of fuel plans. We never ever wound up getting out, flew out of Oceana. You always left the target, which is about 100 miles south, with enough gas to come in based on the weather. The fighter guys were pretty much, well, we'll just jump in the jet, we'll get out there, we'll see what happens, and then we'll fly around until it's time for us to come home. And typically on the radio, as we were talking to Oceana Approach Control, it was always, hey, this is Fighter 102, we're low on gas and got an emergency, we've got to have priority to land. And they'd always tell the A6s, okay, you guys have to do a couple of 360s so we can get these fighter guys in and get them on deck before they crash, burn, and die. So, but I don't know what they do now since they're combined. This is a picture of the A6 cockpit. Can you believe that? I used to know what every single switch did. And those switches didn't necessarily, because the airplane was so old, the label on the switch didn't necessarily have anything to do with what the switch did. I remember there's a switch right here. This switch right here is called the Inker-Dinker switch. And it said INCR, increase, and then you had plus and minus. It was a 2-position spring-loaded toggle switch. And it was Inker-Dinker. And theoretically, I think it used to increase or decrease the frequency of the radar. But I remember reading one maintenance gripe once we landed. You know, you'd write the things that were wrong with the airplane, and I remember reading one that said, Inker-Dinker does not ink or dink. Turns out that switch had nothing to do with inking and dinking. They did something else. But we just know where every single switch is. The interesting thing about this computer This is the A6 computer right here. Its iteration rate was 8 times a second, 8 hertz. This bad boy is running on about, I don't know, 1.6 gigahertz. It's got, I don't know, 12 megs of RAM and, you know, terabyte of disk storage and everything. A6 had 32K of memory in that thing, so it was very, and they were all little bitty magnetic donuts that were sewn in a mat by ladies in Indonesia. That was the memory of an A6 computer. We did, when we dropped bombs, increase the rate to 32 times a second so that we could be a little bit more accurate with drop bombs, but then it didn't do a lot of things like navigate and keep track of where you were. It just focused on dropping bombs. So one of the first things you had to do after dropping a bomb was figure out where you were again, because the computer had forgotten where you were, because you had to just get it. And this is my good buddy, the late Colin Jan, great pilot, died about a year ago. Turning final, we're right at the 90-degree mark. There's the sheet right there. And we're probably about 25 seconds away from landing, 30-degree angle bank and turning in. And the idea was, you know, you turn right over the wake and then you hit the ship. Damn, missed that. Oops. Go back. Down here it says, but I'm looking here, his gear is down and his flaps and slats are up. He's about ready to crash and die. Because and his angle of attack is, it should be up there. His angle of attack is way high, so he's getting ready to die. And actually his vertical speed indicator is level, so at least he's not crashing yet, but he will soon. Just the way it is. All right. Hey, don't depend on luck, but you can always use luck. Never turn down a good lucky turn. Remember my story about day one? That was all luck, and I took complete full credit for it. I guess the other part of that is worry about the stuff you can control, and don't worry so much about some things that you don't have any control over. Because you'll worry yourself sick. There are plenty of things that we don't have control of, that we can worry ourselves to death about. And the lovely Mrs. Crenshaw will hear me say this on occasion when there's something going wrong. And I go, I can't control that. I just can't worry about that. And so that's a good attitude to have. Sometimes you got to think about the things that you can control and really work on getting that right and working in your favor, so that when some of these uncontrollable items happen, then, you know, you can roll with the punches. I can't control the traffic on the Beltway. I'm just not going to worry about it. I can't really control whether or not I think the metro is safe. I guess I can not ride it, but I'm not sure I have that. I don't necessarily have that option. But I don't sit up at night worrying about when the next safety track thing is going to happen and whether or not I'm going to be able to go to the East Falls Church or the West Falls Church metro station. I just don't have any control of that, so I don't worry about that. I worry about maybe if the car has the state inspection up to date. By the way, Virginia residents, did you know that they do free emissions testing? I just got this the other day. All around Virginia, they have these emissions testing stations, and when your car drives by, I guess a sniffer sniffs your exhaust and then takes a picture of your tag and then posts on the state website that your car has passed inspection, emissions inspection. You don't have to go get a... Who knew? They have a little schedule of where they all are. Yes, sir.
Where exactly?
Well, you go on to the VDOT website, and it has a list of, it's called Rapid Pass, I think it is. Wow. And I think it's Rapid Pass or something like that. And it has a schedule. Here's where they're going to be today. And you drive by, and you get, who knew? Technology, what a wonderful thing. How are we doing on time? Because I want some time to discuss. Here's one that I think is very important, particularly in business, and particularly in our lives as Christians, and that's turn into trouble. What is the number one way, even today, that aviators avoid being shot down by missiles? See it and turn into it, and fly as close to it as you possibly can. Try to hit it. That's the best way to avoid being shot down. Turn into the missile. I can remember I actually had a, before Desert Storm, I happened to be on the Libyan raids back in 1986, and I can remember seeing an SA-3 missile lifting off the launch pad, coming right at us. Holy smokes, it's coming right at us. Here it comes. I see it looks like a telephone pole. It's coming right straight at us, and all we did was brake right, turn right into it, went right underneath us, blew up somewhere else. So turn into trouble. This is important, particularly in business. When things are going sour, you start seeing the rats leave the ship, right? I don't want to have anything to do with that. Oh, get rid of that. When there's a problem, someone's going to have to turn into the missile and take it head on and face those problems head on. There are too many people that are willing to turn away. You know, we had Rhodesian Ridgebacks most of our lives when the kids were at home. Mac and Maybe. Jimmy Mac and Maybelline. They were all named for rock and roll songs, right? And good old Maybe didn't think she had to do anything if she didn't look at you when you said it. So she would spend a lot of time not looking at you. She would look away and everything. You could say anything you wanted, and she figured she was covered. It was only when she was looking at you and paying attention that she got into trouble, she thought. And there are a lot of people in business like that who are not looking straight at you and thinking, well, that's okay, that'll be able, it's not my problem. Well, it is your problem if you're worth your salt. And so just like turning into a missile, seeing, avoiding the missiles and turning into them, you should do that when you have problems and you're facing trouble. That's the Aegis cruiser launching a vertically launched missile, or Tomahawk, I think, at somebody. Almost done. Have confidence, not arrogance. And the way you're confident is by practice and being confident what you're doing and not being complacent and satisfied with what happens. You know, if I had a nickel for every time I thought, okay, I've done everything I can do, time to go to bed, things are well, things are not well. So I found one of the secrets of my success was never, ever thinking that what I did was good enough. I was always surprised at my fitness report debriefs when the skipper would say, hey, you're doing a great job. Geez, there's 12 things that I know I should be doing that I'm not doing. And, you know, I just keep stroking at it every day, try to get it right. Because once you think everything's going well, do I have that on here? All is not well. This is launching from the catapult of the USS America. That was Alpha Bravo Squadron. We've got, you can see here, we have 3 1,000-pound bombs on the outboard station, and this is a laser-guided weapon on the inboard station. And the catapult officer has just touched the flight deck, which means the engines are full power, and the catapult's getting ready to fly, go to shoot us. And whether we want to or not, we're going to go fly. Even if you have the parking brake on, you're going to go fly. And what happens when that happens, when you have the parking brake on and you go fly, is you have 2 flat tires to deal with when you come back because they're flat. And that's one of the problems you have to have on an aircraft carrier. If you're one of the first to go and you're sitting there on the catapult and you don't want to keep your feet on the brakes, you put on the parking brake. Well, all of us, you know, you can imagine all of a sudden, you're going full power, everything you're going, and you kind of forget to turn the parking brake off. The good news is you're going to. Bad news is you got to tell, you know, they're going to say, hey, when you come back, we have sort of a little emergency to deal with. That is, you got 2 flat tires. But you're going to land anyway. You're going to trap and everything. This kid is probably 19 years old. He sets the steam setting on the steam valve to make sure you're going to go fly or not. This kid right here is 20 years old. He's the hookup petty officer. The last thing he's done is he was the last person underneath the airplane when we were at full power. These are the intakes, and he was right there checking the tow bar to make sure that we were ready to go. You can't see it, but there's a little metal bar that comes from the back of the wheel back to the deck, and that's what holds you back, because you're sitting there at full power with your feet off the brakes, and there's that little bar with a bolt holding you back. It's called the holdback fitting, oddly enough. And when the catapult fires, that bolt breaks. And half of it goes with you, and the other half stays on the flight deck, and they run back, clean it up. And when you land, one of your plane captains runs up underneath the airplane, gets the other half of the bolt, takes it out, and throws it out.
Flat tires, do you have to drop the bombs at sea?
Well, yes, because you're limited by weight anyway. You generally can't land with weapons on the airplane.
Oh, I see.
Interesting thing about that is, so let's say that you had a problem and you have to get rid of your weapons. you always assume they're going to blow up, because even when you drop them in a safe condition, about 30% of the bombs blow up anyway. So you got to make sure when you're jettisoning your weapons, you're above the pattern. The bomb is called a frag pattern. Most of those bombs throw shrapnel out, and one of the things as bombers you have to be worried about is blowing yourself out of the sky, called fragging yourself, and there are charts about that. But basically, when a bomb blows up, for the height of the shrapnel goes up to about 5,000 feet about 11 seconds after the bomb blows up. So you want to stay above 5,000 feet for 11 seconds.
Even over water.
Even on the water. It blows up everywhere. Plus you'll hit fish too. What a mess. Everyone watches a leader. And I don't care if you're in the military, or you're a politician, or you're a lawyer. Everybody is watching what you do. And you may not think they are, but they are watching what you do. I was surprised. I participated in this program called Leadership at the Peak, run by the Center for Creative Leadership. And one of the things that you do is they send out a whole bunch of surveys to those people who you work for, those people you work with, and those people who work for you. And they send out 30 or 40 of these things. And then you get a big debrief on, well, here's what the people who are on your personal staff think about. And I was really surprised at some of the stuff that they inferred from my behavior. They would think, oh, Admiral's really crabby, things must not be going well at home. I was just naturally crabby. Very big and solid, would be happy. And I could always use another 10 million. And this is all about, the thing about, ethical behavior. What do you do when there's nobody around? How do you do that? Because there's never nobody. Things are always happening. Yes, sir.
You mentioned Jack Aubrey, and I've read all of those books too. When he's out in the Pacific on his boat, he's not in touch with the Admiralty. He's totally on his own, making his own decisions. Today with GPS, with communications, broadband communications, technology, you could, in theory, as squadron commander or even at a higher level, see everything that the pilot sees, and you could make all of those decisions for him. Is that a good leadership model if you were designing the way people act? Or
No.
do you want to favor decision-making at as low a level as
Well, even
possible?
in the 21st century, there's latency. There are things that you can't really, it takes 2 or 3 seconds. So the drones that are flying right now, the Air Force, I'm sorry, they're not drones. They're remotely piloted vehicles. The Air Force has to be very upset about that. They're remotely piloted vehicles, they're controlled somewhere here in the United States. There's a 3 or 4 second latency. Pilot puts in a turn left, 1 potato, 2 potato, 3 potato, 4 potato, then it starts turning. So there's some latency there. And so, but that's not, and I think I'll advertisement, Navy is a little unique in this because we still can't communicate. You think a young commanding officer of a submarine who's miles from nowhere, perhaps under the polar ice cap, for doing some sort of mission. He's, 42, 43 years old, commanding officer of an attack submarine.
Oh, gosh,
39, commanding officer of an attack submarine, nuclear weapons, all that stuff. He's under the polar ice cap. He can't call home. He can't, there's no communication. He has to rely on his judgment or her judgment these days, and has no ability to check back in with the front office to see what's going on. And I think, the minute we start depending on the front office, it used to always amaze me. Where are my Air Force vets here? I was a deputy commander of Operation Southern Watch, and it used to amaze me how my Air Force brethren would, before they decided anything, they always picked up the phone in Riyadh and would call back to the Pentagon. Hey, this is happening. What do you think? First of all, they had to spend time explaining what's going on. They're not necessarily, the people in the Pentagon don't know the personalities, they don't know the squadrons, they don't know, hey, it's Stinky and Bill that are up flying right now. The last time they were flying, they gooned something up, and so I'm not sure we want to, they don't know any of that stuff. So And the minute you depend on that happening is when the generator goes down or something's not working. You know, in Kennedy we had America, which I have most of my deployments on. The America, we had something called the Super Bowl heading. And that was the heading that the ship had to be on in order to receive continuously uninterrupted satellite communications. And so if we were going to watch the Super Bowl, it was a navigator's duty to make sure we had about 4.5 or 5 hours of open sea room steaming on one heading, because if we had to turn, we'd lose the signal. We wouldn't get Super Bowl. So for that reason alone, it's not quite, I just don't think it's a good practice. There's, even now as we're developing the unmanned vehicles and these sorts of things, we're building in artificial intelligence into these things.
So you would move decision-making down to the lowest level.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what I think we need to do. Okay, a couple of quick things. Hey, be brave. Nothing wrong with being brave, but don't be foolish. Live to fight again another day. And don't drag down others with you and choose your battles. That's enough said there. Hey, the ramp can kill you too. The ramp is what's known as the back of the airplane, and that can kill you. Imagine flying 8 hours, refueling twice from KC-135, dropping 13,000 pounds of high explosives, flying through shrapnel and anti-aircraft fire and missiles, and avoiding running into all those other thousands of airplanes that are flying over the battlefield at the time and getting home, and then you crash into the back of the boat and die? Oh, come on. So you have to be 100% ready all the time, from the beginning to the end, 100%. I see this a lot in proposal writing, and people who think incumbents from contracts, we got it. We're covered on this one because they love us over there. The Navy loves us. We've had this contract for 10 years, and they don't necessarily put the effort that they should put in the proposal. And guess what? Crenshaw Consulting wins instead, because I was sweating it the whole time. Now, you can't sweat everything, but you also have to sweat everything sometimes, and the little things can kill you. So sweat little things. So this is landing on the sheep. I can tell that he might not make it because he's high. But you can see there's not a lot of room, and their jets are packed over here. The arresting gear is here, here, and there. And the reason why I think he's not going to make it is this is the Meatball. You've heard him talk about Meatball. This is the Meatball right here. And there's a line of green lights, and then there's a bright yellow light in the middle called the Meatball. That should be right exactly aligned with the center of those green lights, and it's not. It's a little high, which means there's 4 wires to catch. So he's high like that. If he's lucky, he'll catch a 4-wire. More than likely, depends on what his trend is. If he doesn't have a good enough rate of descent, he's gonna miss the wire, and you just go around. It's called a bolter. On the other hand, and this is where discipline comes in, if he were to think I'm going high and pull a lot of power back, he'd start sinking like a rock, and he'd wind up running into the back of the ship, because it's easy to take the power off of a jet engine, but on the airplanes when you're flying, when you get ready to take off, that's, the pilots have advanced the throttles to max power long before you hear the motors spinning up. And so you don't have enough time, you've got this tendency, I'm going high, I need to pull the power off. Well, if you do that, you're going to hit the ramp, and then you're going to die. Not good. On the scale of good or bad. Okay, appreciate your crew and recognize them every day. There's a thing about management course. The one question on the management leadership course was, what's the name of the person that empties the trash in the classroom every day? Knowing about your people. So, they're the ones that you're serving. And so it all comes back to, humility, value others above yourself. Don't worry about giving everybody credit. It'll happen. And if you spend your time making sure that everybody that works for you is getting the right credit, you're going to get the credit yourself too without having to worry about it. Okay, quick question. Dave, anybody know who this is? King David. What did Dave portray us and King David have in common? That's Sheba. That's Sheba Syndrome. And I wanted to end up on this note. Something for us all to think about. Because we can all fall prey to Sheba Syndrome. And there's a group of, or two doctors, Dean Ludwig and Clint Longnecker, who long ago wrote about the Sheba Syndrome. And what it is the inability to cope with and respond to the byproducts of success. You get so successful. Is that me beeping? Could very well be. Oh, yeah, that probably means we're out of time. What we got?
About 3 minutes.
3 minutes? Okay. They talk about things. There's four factors that cause you to do this. This is how do good, decent people wind up getting in trouble and doing really stupid things. You know, I mean, the Navy's got this whole thing about the Fat Leonard thing right now that's got, 30 flag officers in limbo and people going to jail. And Petraeus is just one guy. He's a good buddy of mine. How does that happen? Well, this is because you can get so powerful that you get complacent and you lose focus on what it is you're supposed to be doing. That you have privileged access. You get to go places where other people can't go. You get to talk to people and do things that other people can't do. You can say, make it so, and it's made so. You can do that. And you generally have unrestrained control of the tools that are entrusted to you. No one's going to second guess you while you're out there. You can pretty much say and do whatever you want. And probably the most dangerous one of all is the belief that you can manipulate the outcomes. I know this is probably not a good idea, but I am so good, I will be able to control it. I will be able, the press is not going to get a hold of this because I'm just that good. I'm too clever for them. And that's the story of Bathsheba and King David. And so when you see these good people doing bad things, you might not want to hate them all that much because, there, but for the grace of God go I. And I could see myself sometimes succumbing to some of this Bathsheba problem. So, beware, it's called the dark side of success. Success does have a dark side, and that is being too successful that you think you can solve every problem, that you are unanswerable, that you answer to no one, and that everything in your control you can control, and you're just that good. And so remember, if you think you're that good, you're not that good. And so for leaders, I have a recommendation for daily reading. I would read 2 Samuel chapter 11. Read that bad boy every day, and you'll find out the story. I'm sure you all know the story of Bathsheba and King David, but it's so applicable in today's world, in today's political environment, and in business, and in our lives. So I think it all comes down to your choices, and that's it. And we got maybe 1 minute. What time is it here?
That's great.
We're supposed to be done at 9:30, and it's
Thank you.
9:29.
Thank you,
Don't
everyone.
want to be early.